So we're with George Angelopoulos and Miles Lowry at Eclectic Gallery, and you guys have an amazing show. And one of the things that I find astounding is the two artists collaborating together on absolutely everything. It's unheard of. I mean, I think it's an amazing breakthrough that you guys have done. And can you tell me what started the inspiration of collaborating?
It wasn't going to be every piece, but we just couldn't stop. We were going to kind of do a little bit of both or whatever, but we started having a lot of fun. At a certain point, it was like, let's do another one. And so we just kept going, and then pretty much every single piece has both our hands in it. And we got along. It was just one of those things where we were in the right frame of mind to tune in together and experiment and explore. And she would write beautifully, and then I'd erase half of it, and she wouldn't mind. So it was really fun.
And what was very interesting was also just sitting down and thinking about what we were going to do before we actually did it, and what we were interested in, why we were interested in, and finding parallels in our cultures, in our heritages, and writing Miles's scripts that belong to, the Irish world, and Miles working with Greek work. So a lot of going back and forth.
Well, one of the things I found really inspiring was actually reading the labels. It's something that we don't often do when we go to art galleries.
Well, there's so much information here, you've got to read some of it, right?
And the marks of devotion, it's you can take that quite literally with both of your works. Mm-hmm. So can you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, for me, the marks of devotion, first and foremost, were our own devotion to what we love and what we're passionate about and that we're devoted to, because we're skill building and learning and creating because we are fascinated by something and we're very loyal to it, obviously. And then the second part of it, I think, is taking devotional texts that were written with devotion or have a religious aspect, not necessarily, from all different periods. So I think that was the second part of the devotional thing.
Devotion just came back as a word because we'd looked at, the Lindisfarne Gospels, and we'd also looked at cave paintings, and we'd looked at all these things that were marks that were made with such intent that there was no way that those were just done maybe there was some that were done for the fun of it, but it sure didn't feel like it. These are people who painstakingly worked and found beautiful ways to solve problems with text, and so we just started working with paint and text and letting it go a little more fluid than our past ancestors, and but honoring them and making sure that we understood something of what their approach was.
I think what you said about honoring the past is so relevant, and it's so I'm very aware of it in your work that you really touched on some ancient texts, some ancient ways of working. The method that you're employing is also ancient. So the whole aspect of applying gold to the surface of a rare object, I think it's very special.
And the gold is very important in some ways because we tried to make sure that the gold, George is very famous for working with gold, and I do a little bit of it, but she's really got a handle on it. But she kept finding that perfect place where the gold needs to be, and we pondered every single piece together, and eventually we would agree. Somehow it worked, even though we'd play around for a while, and the gold was very important in the placement.
And using materials that, mineral pigments, lapis lazuli, real gold, not gold paint, real gold powder. That was quite important to us.
We agreed we were not going to work with anything except the real stuff.
It's interesting. Some time ago, I was speaking with Anthony Thorne, and he said that his reference books were 500 years old.
Absolutely. Right? Well, many of the mixtures used in some of the raised gilding here are 15th century recipes. So they go back to a time when people did collaborate and work together, where there were scriptoriums, but there was an illuminator, so Miles could be our illuminator, and a calligrapher, and people did work together to realize these devotional pieces.
Well, it does reflect on tradition as well, and as you're saying, the illuminated manuscripts were a collaborative process. It wasn't one person sitting there for eons, writing it. It was really transcribing.
It sort of throws out the window a little bit this this notion of the artist as an isolated individual working alone, and so it was completely the opposite,
Now we were
experience.
both hands, four hands in there doing everything. And it turned out to be quite contemporary, which really shocked us. After all this studying and traveling to places and all the things that brought this show together, we ended up looking at them going, oh, that looks pretty contemporary. So here's this ancient text flowing in a way that is different. And I think we're very excited by the way that the text came back to life from the ancient times into these contemporary times.
Well, there's one thing that we discussed was the Sanskrit word for contemporary or for traditional means moving forward. So we have tradition within us. We've learned from all the people before us, but we need to be in our century. We need to sort of move forward with what we've learned. So we talked a lot about that and how we were going to do that. And so I think that was part of it.
I think in many cases your design is extremely contemporary. The way that you're applying words on canvas is extremely contemporary. It's like it's very cutting edge. What you're doing is bringing your knowledge and awareness of ancient culture to the present day. We are still the same culture.
Well, some things don't change. I mean, or the way they change is extraordinary, and it's interesting. But you look at lettering, and you can go back quite far, and you go, well, these letters are actually ancient marks.
They are.
And you think, oh, well, I thought they were just texts. Text is such an interesting word because we use it to mean something different than they used to. Now a text is something you send on a little machine, but it's still text.
Yes.
Yeah, there have been, like for example, in type design in the 20th century, they were looking back to ancient letters, and that's why we have sans serif text. It's all of a sudden, let's go back to essential forms. So they were going back and looking at ancient Greek letters, which were not serif. So they're actually very contemporary, but what they are actually is very ancient.
Yeah, so they serve both purposes. They can travel in both worlds.
Well, it's also interesting from my point of view that you can understand and read those ancient texts, that you have knowledge that culturally and aesthetically that you're able to dive into the meaning of these texts. And that comes through as well.
And they're beautiful contemporary abstract marks.
They are indeed.
We're very, very pleased with the way it all came together in terms of bridging all of those ideas that seemed to be companions to each other and came into being through this process.
Yeah, because calligraphy is traditionally, it's a book art. It's a book art. We come from a literary tradition. We're transcribing religious or secular writing. So I think this is quite wonderful because it brings together literature as well as art and other crafts and skills as well.
And we really hope people will read as well as look at the shapes.
I
Both
think
are
it's
relevant.
very important to read because you get an understanding of the source of where these texts are coming from, and also why you have chosen that particular fragment of text to
Yes, we pondered a lot of different texts, and we fell in love with them. When you fall in love with a piece of writing, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like, that's the one. We just knew.
We just know.
So that was easy.
Well, it's a very exciting show, and I really hope that a lot of people have the opportunity of coming to both see it and read it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.